Hello and welcome to the Winners of Sheffield podcast. On this episode we'll be interviewing David Warman, who has deep roots in Sheffield but was born and raised in Watford.
David has been delivering solutions to help young people overcome barriers to learning in a variety of settings since 2004, and today is Chief Executive of Shaped, which stands for Sheffield Alternative Provision for Education. Shaped is a business he founded in 2019, which offers alternative education to young people that struggle to access mainstream schools. They also support young people with their social and emotional skills, build resilience, develop their academic self-awareness and life skills. In 2025, David and his team aim to establish a dedicated premises in Sheffield, with the vision of evolving into a fully fledged school. This will enable them to support children 5 days a week and extend their services beyond the limitations of their current setup.
We are the Winners of Sheffield podcast first. Someone on the show who's not actually technically from Sheffield, although you've been here since you were 19. So talk us through your early years.
I was born in Watford. As you said, my gran and granddad were from Sheffield. My dad and his brother and sister were born in Sheffield. He moved down to Watford when I was, I wasn't born, and then I was born in Watford, grew up in Watford, and I ended up coming back. I came to Sheffield really because of that connection, but I applied to university here. Got knocked back the first time I applied, didn't get in, so I worked for a year. Talked my way in somehow. So I did business studies at Sheffield University. So I was at Randmore Hall of Residence in the first year, and then lived around Broomhill and Crooksmoor in my uni days, and moved to Hillsborough in my last year of uni. Uni was an interesting time. I didn't warm to it. I was a little bit older than everybody else because I'd been working when I left school. I just found it difficult being in the student bubble because I had some connections in Sheffield. I went and just people that knew my mum and dad, I went round there for Sunday lunch. They looked after me a little bit.
I'll be there all the time.
Yeah, well, I know. And you know what? It's funny. I just remember never having a sofa when I was at uni. And actually going around someone's house.
I don't think they have.
There was a family, just being able to relax in that environment. I felt more comfortable in that than I did often in the university environment. And that probably is what was it part of it that led to me, I completely and utterly failed my first year of university. I had to retake a number of different modules, and really that was a lot to do with my dyslexia. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 13, 14 in school. But the thing with me is I grew up in an environment where it was never emphasised that I couldn't do something. It was always emphasised what I could do. Yeah. And I felt lucky, now I look back, I felt lucky to be in the school that I was because there was so much sport, there was so much drama, so much music. They emphasised the arts curriculum to the point where you don't get that now. Working in education, you just don't get that. But also I could talk my way through anything. Put me in a classroom where we're talking about something, I would be able to debate, argue. I'm very sharp in doing all of that stuff. And I think that's how I got through school. Yeah. I knew what I was talking about, but I never really found a way to connect my brain to paper until I went to university. And at university, I failed emphatically in the first year. I think I failed 3 modules, retook all of them, and I still got hung up. I was doing business studies and I got hung up on macroeconomics, which is not something that I deal with on a daily basis now. But they wouldn't let me through to the second year without passing this macroeconomics module. And so I had to retake that one module in the second semester. So I had all this time on my hands. I just worked. So I got a right. I already had a job as a gym instructor at Sheffield University, S10 Health, which I got before I even came to uni. I just rocked up and said, I've got a gym instructor qualification. Yeah. Got any jobs? And
was that a Goodwin Sports? Yeah,
Goodwin Sports, yeah. So I was there the whole time. But one of the families that I knew in Sheffield, the mum was a teaching assistant at Newfield School. And she said, we've got a kid who comes with a bit of extra funding in our behaviour resource department. And she said, I could probably get you a job for 6 months or something like that if you'd be interested. And I worked in this department of Newfield School, which was just a room, a behaviour resource department they called it, with the most inspirational guy, a guy called David Warman. And in that 6 months, he sent me on so many training courses and just invested in me as a person, which actually probably changed direction that I was going in.
Yeah. So definitely a mentor then.
Well, I only knew him for 6 months, but yeah, like he was one of those people. Don't know whether you have it, but where you meet him and then actually it's significant. Whilst you're not with him a lot, you don't know him. I didn't know him really well, but
The impact
he had was just pretty amazing, really. And at the same time, I mentioned about connecting my brain to paper personally. The university supported me amazingly with my dyslexia, and for the first time in my education, I found a way to just connect what seems like chaos in my brain a lot of the time to paper. Right. And just it seems simple now. 20 years ago, it was a new thing, but mind maps and not thinking about the order things need to go in, just getting it out. And she just taught me how to answer questions, like academic questions. It's the sort of stuff I feel like you need to know in primary school, but I just never got it.
So she was sort of a good mentor to you as well.
I mean, she was amazing as well. That year, when I look back now, it was a pretty key year, really.
How did you see you said then when you failed university, you had dyslexia. What place were you in then? Like, were you thinking, where's my life going here? I can't do this and I've got that on top of me. Were you thinking different option or?
I mean, I went into business studies because I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right, and I just thought,
my
my dad was self-employed over the majority of his career, so I've seen someone working for himself, and so he worked in public transport. My granddad was a chief engineer in Sheffield through the Second World War, so he was a very stoic, strong guy who said to my dad, either go into transport or sewage, because you'll never be out of work. And that was back in the so my dad decided he didn't really want to deal with sewage, so he thought he'd go into transport. My dad has been a pretty important person in my life. I just learnt a lot from him, but he's the way he thinks, he's a very future-oriented person. Our holidays, he'd always be squeezing work in, whether that was to New Zealand, to America, to places in Europe, Finland. I remember going. It was like he'd find a way to pay for a trip. I had no idea what he actually did. We were in the hotel, but that's kind of holidays were usually a working situation, or we'd be visiting my family because my mum's German, so we've got a lot of German family, Italian relatives as well. So we'd be visiting family. My dad, he's quite a creative person. He always talked about sort of being the first person to come up with real-time information systems. Mm-hmm. So back in the 70s. So everything that we've got on our apps now for buses and things like that, even the tracking of taxis and things like that, that's what he was looking at in the 70s. And it was all for him about time and about like the psychology of time. And if people think, well, I've got 10 minutes before the bus comes and I can trust that, I can go and get a coffee and then I come back, and it makes the whole travelling experience different. And that's what you talk about.
So with regards to the education system, you obviously figured out, and I always think about skills as a bag of tricks. You've got a bag of tools and you then figured out how to comprehend stuff that that you struggle with yourself. Presumably that's part of the reason why you wanted to get into the education system yourself, is it?
Well, I think my journey through education and what I see now is one sort of one aspect of it. My experience at university and actually finding a way to connect my brain to paper and realising that it isn't actually about a deficiency in me. It's just I've got a different way of approaching stuff. Yeah. My brain works differently, and I think we know and talk about that a lot more now. Like I'm very into personality, understanding people's personality and differences, and actually just realise that people are just wired differently, and we assume that like everyone thinks in the same way. We just have an assumption, but we know that's not the case. And I think when you get into the education system, that education system was set up for a purpose, and actually a lot of what we experience today was set up in the Industrial Revolution, right? Yeah. Like in that time where we needed to educate kids en masse, or we decided to educate kids en masse, that's where our systems of education come from. There's a brilliant talk by Ken Robinson on changing educational paradigms, which you can see on YouTube. I've absolutely loved a lot of stuff that Ken Robinson's done, but it's because it's connected with my experience of school myself, where I experienced a lot of success, but not directly in a classroom. I just experienced the environment where I could thrive at the school I was at. Some of my inspiration for what we do now, an organisation that I set up called Shaped, which I'll go into more, but was actually prior to the Industrial Revolution, the changing the way that we did schools. How were people educated? Well, they were educated in villages, they were educated in families, they were educated with mentors, they were educated in apprenticeships. And actually there's so much learning and growth and formation that happens in those relationships that actually is something that we don't really have in the education system today. It will happen in pockets. Don't get me wrong, like there will be people that are in the education system, maybe like your wife, and I certainly was when I was in it. You look to make a difference to the young people that you're working with, and that's brilliant. But you're working within a wider culture that sometimes you can't even see when you're in it, and actually it is a culture that tries to control. Yeah, tries to get young people to conform. I actually think I always needed something to battle against when I was a kid. I remember many times when I had to talk my way out of a situation with the head teacher or the deputy head, because I got myself in trouble. Yeah. Or
we've both been there, haven't we, Charles?
Yeah. So I've got one sister, and she's 2 years older than me, and I remember I had to sit in the deputy head's office all day because I made a pellet with a elastic band and I flicked it and he got this kid in the eye. I didn't mean to get him in the eye, but I did get him in the eye, which it wasn't good. But I was basically in like an isolation all day in this assistant head's office. But I just talked to him quite a lot, and he was my sister's maths teacher. And my sister said to me, later on, that teacher, he actually proper liked you at the end of it all. Yeah. And that's what I think my skill was, people, like getting on with people.
When you started at Newfield and you said they gave you someone to look after and take you on that road, did that start the switch in your head where you thought, I want to help, this is where I want to go, I like doing this, this could be the path that I want to go down?
I mean, it probably started for me in bits of youth work that I'd done, in my latter teens. But this was the first time I worked in a school environment. Right. And actually, I kind of saw this kid who struggled in all of these lessons and being in the school environment. And I was literally there to help him with that. And I don't know what I thought at that point, because actually I was like 22 years old at that point.
Right. Okay.
And I still remember not really knowing what I wanted to do by the time I was 30. I kind of thought, well, this is good, so I'll do this. Like, it wasn't, because I actually, just to complete that bit of the story, I worked with this lad, and then I knocked the macroeconomics exam out of the park, right? That's all I had to focus on for the years. So I got onto the second year of uni.
So did you think as you passed that block, here I go, this is the path?
In some ways, but it also, like, I did definitely have times where I was like, I don't know that maybe I'm not cut out for uni. Maybe this isn't for me. And I kind of held on to the fact that I'd never have to do macroeconomics again. I wouldn't have to take accounting modules again. Like, that wasn't why I was doing business studies. Like, I wanted to do business studies, so I was interested in psychology, people, how people work, problem solving and management and consultancy and all of that sort of stuff, which is what I focused on. So when I started going down that road, I was like, actually, I can do this. With the tools where I connected my brain to paper, I could write stuff using all sorts of tools. I still struggle with reading, but I don't worry about that because I listen to everything now. But that was the introduction to doing things differently at university.
Is that podcasts and audiobooks and stuff like that?
I take in information audibly and visually. I think one important value for me is like connection, right? So connection with people, but also connecting ideas. Yeah. So sometimes I'll just briefly engage with something, but then I've connected it in my mind and I'm connecting it to other things and sometimes I want to know more about that. I'm someone who is good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing.
I've dealt with a lot of students, and I think it's still happening now, to be fair to them. But a lot of students I find, they start the university courses. First year, they're bouncing. Second year, and this is why I'm asking you, were you just doing it because it was a uni course, and you're just doing it for doing its sake? Because I'm finding a lot more now, they get into the second year and then they're seeing other avenues that they want to try and they're just doing this course for doing it. Then when they've put themselves through it, not only have they saddled themselves with a lot of emotion and tiredness and well-being and stuff like that, issues that just to get through it, but they're coming out and then going down that route. Not the same with you?
It's interesting, I became more motivated as I went on.
Right.
The stuff that I could get into deeper that I was really interested in, I really struggled jumping the hurdles to get to what I really wanted to do.
I get it.
That was my experience of it. I think I went into uni thinking I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 25.
Yeah.
Doing business studies, that's what I'm going to do. But those things that happened in that second year where I failed and I was retaking stuff, it kind of just changed my priorities and thinking, actually, I really enjoy helping people. I really enjoy working with young people that are struggling. Partly because I felt lucky to have had the environment that I grew up in where my problems were not highlighted. I was just encouraged to do things that, I was good at.
Yeah.
But I saw a system in which young people's struggles were just over highlighted, and there wasn't the opportunity to do all the things that really help them feel alive.
Do you think there's a tendency to over-label stuff as well, as in ADHD, dyslexia?
I mean, the problem for me is, what's the purpose of the label, right? So there's nothing wrong with having, like, I am probably ADHD, right? I haven't got a diagnosis, but the way my brain works.
I would second that.
Yeah. But I've got the diagnosis of dyslexia. Again, it's the way my brain works. I think for me, it's more about this is the way I look at it. And I think about families, and I think, as a family, as a dad, I'm going to do everything I possibly can. I'll bend over backwards to help my kids. Whatever they need, I will do that. But the reality, so whatever needs they have, whether it's autism, ADHD, they just think differently, well, I'm going to do whatever I can for them. But the world is not going to bend over backwards for you. So as a family, I need to raise you as someone who is not going to expect everyone to bend over backwards for you, because the world is not going to. And actually, I think there's an over-reliance on getting a diagnosis, getting a label, in order that everyone will bend over backwards, like to help you. But the reality of the situation, I'm a pragmatist. Like, the reality is, it's really helpful to understand the way that you operate, the way that you work best. And it's helpful to be in environments where that's understood, and it helps you to be you and the best you can be. But to get a label that then makes you expect everybody else to bend to what you need is problematic. Yeah. Because it doesn't work like that.
So the main part of your journey is Shaped. How did that come about? What is it?
Yeah, so firstly, we're called Shaped in large part because relationships shape people. Positively and negatively shape people. We are who we are in large because of the relationships we've had with people. You've already mentioned some mentors, you think about family, you think about friends. And so if that's the thing that shapes people the most, what I wanted to create was an education environment where we focused on helping to shape young people through positive relationships. Yeah. And we work with young people who are really challenged. I would say young people in crisis. I say that. A lot of people will say behavioural problems, they've got this, they've got that, they're really challenging. I just see young people in crisis. And I learned that way back when, as a teaching assistant in Newfield School, behaviour is communication. So what is going on for a young person underneath the surface that is making them behave in the way that they are? And I think I worked in secondary schools for, like I said, about 15 years. And there came a point 6 years ago, just over 6 years ago, where I just felt more a part of the problem than the solution for these young people. And I felt like there was a different way, a different thing that we could do. Because of everything that I was learning from sort of in training around mental health, around attachment disorders, and the way that the brain develops and the way that we are shaped as people, that interest, that hobby interest in psychology, right? It just opened up this, like, okay, there's a different way to do it. And I probably spent, it was 2018 that I left. I was inclusion leader, and I've been for 5 years at a school in Sheffield, Birley Secondary School. And I managed all the support staff, had responsibility around safeguarding, attendance, behaviour. And really, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy the job, or I didn't enjoy helping managing the team. It was that the environment wasn't helpful for some young people, and I just saw young people just kind of falling out of the system. And I felt like there weren't the environments that we needed to help those young people. In fact, I had a really clear picture where I just saw faces of young people that I had worked with just falling. And what I felt like then in the picture, I just kind of saw sort of lights sort of around Sheffield just lighting up. And those lights then became connected, and it just created a net that was actually catching the young people that were falling through the system. And I think that image, it was about 10 years before I actually started Shaped. And in that 10 years, I used to talk about it with everyone that knows me and heard about what I wanted to do. I'm not that I named it Shaped. But it was in 2018. I was actually off sick for a little while. Got a nasty problem with my liver, which...
Tough mother, that was.
Yeah, it was tough. So I did... start of the new academic year, 9th of September, I was booked on in Leeds to do a Tough Mudder, it's a 10-mile obstacle course thing. Maybe foolishly, I don't know. But but what actually happened was I didn't realise it at the time, but I had a strain of hepatitis A and hepatitis E in my system at the time. And I was doing this Tough Mudder course and I just felt completely dehydrated.
Did you?
And I said, where are all the water stations? Like I was going around with the team.
Yeah.
And I remember going to St John of Ambulance place and I was like, have you got any water? I just need some water. They're like, no, if you're not feeling right, you have to stop. And I'm like, there's no way I'm stopping. Like I can't stop. And so
they didn't have any water on the cup.
No, they did. Well, they did, but I think it was because I had that, my body was just in severe dehydration mode, so there was never enough water for me.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't get enough water into me because my liver wasn't working properly. And you flip it around, and I was like, stupidly maybe, but I did complete the Tough Mudder course with hepatitis A, so that's. But
should be a trophy.
I paid the cost for it because I was in hospital then, like 2 weeks later because I couldn't stop being sick, and they didn't know what was the matter with me. They thought I'd ingested something on the course, but as it turned out, that some tests were done, and I was off work for 2.5 months. But that gives you a lot of time to think about what you're doing, and I just in that time. I was back at work in December, end of November, December. I knew that was going to be my last year working at Birley. And I think when your mindset changes like that, you start looking for different ways of doing things. And there was a church that wanted to set up an alternative provision at the church. I'm doing a lot of work in schools, and I was in the planning stages with them. I said, I can help you with that.
Which church was that?
That was Wadsley Church.
Oh,
and time went on, and I ended up working with them for a year, supporting them to set up Salted, which was probably for me a first iteration of what Shaped would become. So I kind of got an opportunity to try that out, working with a group of people. Yeah. But at the same time, an alternative provision that I'd already worked with through my job at Birley, where we referred students to, run by Manor and Castle Development Trust. It was an old converted pub, the Steel Inn on Harbour Avenue. They also had some staff changes and they needed a bit of help to bring it back up to where it needed to be. Mm-hmm. So I worked with them for 2 days a week, and I worked with the church for 2 days a week, and doing similar stuff, just using my expertise of working in schools to be able to set up these and run these alternative provisions. And it was interesting because at the time, I kind of, my own faith really is a big part of my life, right? Yeah. So I actually thought we were going to expand what we were going to do through the church model. But interestingly, it was the CEO of Manor and Castle Development Trust, Debbie Matthews, who's retired now. She kind of just saw something in me that was like, I think you need an organisation to do this, Dave. And her and one of the development managers, who's one of our trustees now at Shaped, Julie Ward-Cates, and their finance director, we got together and they just helped me talk through what it would look like. And they basically incubate. We set up Shaped as a private limited company by guarantee, so it was a not-for-profit organisation from the start. Yeah. And they let me use their finance department for about 18 months.
Were they funding you then, 3 people?
Well, no, not really. They basically incubated us as a small business, which was phenomenal. I cannot tell you how, not just the support from them.
How do you get it off the ground?
Honestly, I mean, they gave us 10 grand as a non-interest loan.
All right.
They let us use their finance department, and so their financial manager was doing all our accounts. I did know a bit about it from my business studies days, but as I said, I didn't want to focus on accounting. Yeah. So, to have that expertise there, and then because it was a private limited company by guarantee, we had directors, voluntary directors. So the finance director, Julie, the development manager, and we just pulled together, and I was accountable to them as the CEO of the newly formed small business. And they just supported me to be able to run it. And I remember in that first month, thinking, I'm now responsible for people's mortgages. And I just had a bit of a like people have to pay their mortgage, and
it's on you.
This has to be successful. And I remember the loan paid for the first month's wages. Second month's wages, it didn't cover it. So I actually asked my dad for a bit of help, could you loan me this money? The invoices will come in, they're just not in yet. And I knew it was coming in from the first lot of payments from because what they also did, Manor and Castle Development Trust, was they had some ongoing business, which they just basically said, right, that's now Shape's business.
Yeah.
So, and they had staff that they tupied over to us as well.
Okay.
So we were ready to go because of the project that Manor and Castle Development Trust already had, but it needed to grow. So we needed to establish the students that we already had, and the contract we already had, and then we needed to grow, which we were doing by October, November. So Shapes have got 3 main objectives, right? To reduce permanent exclusions, to create better alternative provision in the city, and to support, other organisations to become trauma informed in their approach, and supporting young people in crisis. So we don't actually work. Young people that we work with have been permanently excluded, but we don't work with them because they've been permanently excluded. We try and avoid permanent exclusion. So yeah, we put out to schools, and I was fortunate. I had the network of people in my previous work that I'd done. They knew who I was, and we were essentially educating young people in a very different environment to schools. I would say more like family, less like a classroom. We educate them in that different environment, small groups, high numbers of adults to students, but it might be 6 students to 3 adults, or 4 adults sometimes. And so we're educating them in a completely different environment than school. But in school, those were the kids who might, things happen in different ways, but certainly we've had kids that, would be fighting a lot, would be throwing tables, would get very angry. Some of that is around anxiety, and actually it's a response to the anxiety they're feeling in the environment of school. Some of it is around the challenges they're having in their home life, and actually the stress levels that some of these young people are under means that their response to sometimes insignificant things to other people is just an unregulated response. So it's coming out in all sorts of different directions. And actually, in an environment where control, order, conformity is important, that just gets really highlighted. Yeah. They're the young people that get permanently excluded from schools, or even before permanent exclusions, they'll get suspensions, which then reinforces this idea in that child's mind, because they're being shaped all the time, right, through their experiences. Reinforces the idea that I don't fit into that, I'm no good, I'm rubbish in it. And so, even before anyone gets permanently excluded, their confidence and their understanding of themselves is rock bottom, because they think they can't do anything. Because the only environments they've been operating in are environments which are not set up to help their needs. I think young people need they need other people to help them understand who they are. The way that they relate with other people. So when a village is raising a child, all right, you'll have your uncle over here, you'll have the crazy uncle, you'll have the guy who you go to get advice from, or the matriarchal mother figure in the village that will look after you. Yeah. You've got the kids. So when you have different people that you can go to and you have a positive relationship with, it actually helps you understand more of you. Yeah. Because in that exchange of relationships, it forms you. And so I don't think there's enough of that, for sure. You can try and with your own family think how that develops, but I think generally in society, I don't think there's enough. I listen to your Glyn Rhodes, and that is another space that young people can develop positive relationships, build the self-esteem in a boxing club. Fantastic. It's things like that in the community which genuinely help to shape young people.
And it's often disaffected youth that end up boxing and that kind of...
because you can be successful at it, right? Yeah. If you don't experience success, how do you know what that even feels like? How do you step into being proud of yourself for something if you don't experience any success? And if in a school environment you don't experience any success, what is that environment doing for you?
You're being told you're not good enough, so it's a way of taking your anger out on that as well, I guess.
Yeah. It's really difficult. I work obviously still in education. I would say Shaped is part of the wider educational ecosystem in the city. Right, that's one way of putting it. That's the way that alternative provision is put together. We work with young people that basically can't work in the mainstream school environment.
You say young people, Dave. What the age groups tend to be at Shape? What's the age range?
So we will work with secondary age students. The majority of them are year 10, year 11, so 13, 14, 15, 16 right. It'd be older end of secondary. I think, what we do, we charge schools to use our service, right? So
they might still be in school.
So they will still be on roll at the school, yeah. Or the local authority will pay for it.
Are you a sort of correctional facility then, for want of a better phrase, to get them?
Can I give you a different phrase?
Yeah.
We just provide an environment where those young people can be successful.
But then the idea of getting them back in school, is that
because we work with the older end, it's more about re-engaging them in the wider education system. That might be to college, to some sort of post-16. But with younger students, we don't do as much of it right now. The aim would be to get them back into school, absolutely, yeah.
Do the parents of these children get involved in this process as well, or is it?
Absolutely, it's key. We make a big effort to just inviting parents in and helping them be part of the whole process. Yeah. And actually, often there's different things we've got to do in that, but actually a big part of it is just saying, like, this looks hard. Like, just empathy with a parent around what they've actually got to do, and just befriending them, because actually,
again, I imagine a lot of these kids maybe haven't got parent figure.
I see all sorts, right? I see that. We work with a lot of children that are looked after, so in the care system. We work with families where there's a single parent. Often we work with families who the kids are actually with a grandparent. So there's a lot of brokenness out there. We also worked with young people whose parents are together, and actually a lot of their challenges are around their SEND needs, and how school is the wrong environment for them. Right, so it isn't like just one thing that we're dealing with. And it's an interesting little debate, which I'll just put into a little bit, right? If you take something like ADHD, all right, there's a lot of understanding around it. It's a lot around the environment. If you put someone with ADHD in an environment where they've got to be like a hunter-gatherer in a tribe or something like that, they have the status, they have the skills and the abilities, like, to be hyper-aware when they need to be. They are the hero of that tribe, right? And put that same person into a city environment where they're in a pokey flat, they're not in the outdoors, like everything is bought, consumed. There have been some studies that have been done in parts of Africa where people from a tribe are in the tribe, and those same groups of people then are in the city, and the mental health is shocking in the city because they're not in the environment that they're kind of are made to be, right? So actually, that's why the environment's so key. So is there anything wrong with them? I don't think it's helpful to call it a disorder. Yeah, I just think it's the way it is. People are, and I think.
And again, you said there you think you're ADHD. My mum's constantly saying she thinks I've got ADHD.
My wife says that. My wife says that.
Ian said the same. So again, it's sort of, how useful is it when we're a population of 3 and we all think that to some shape or form we have it. Like you said, I think there's a value to recognising. But again, going back to the autism thing, and I saw the documentary with Paddy McGuinness, and he's got 3 children that are all autistic, but all 3 of them are completely different, and so there isn't a real value in knowing it, because you can't really, it's not a one-size-fits-all even once you've got autism, is there?
It is about understanding people, helping other people understand themselves, and helping to create environments where everyone can be successful. But the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work in that sense, So education is within a broader system, it's a one-size-fits-all. Although it isn't, because actually there are places like Shape, there are places that are independent schools, there are places that are able to do something different.
Apparently homeschooling is at the highest it's ever been.
Yeah, quite. I mean, and actually a lot of the reading I did in my 20s around education was from a guy called John Holt, who is like the father of homeschooling, back from the 70s and actually he would talk about how much like Ken Robinson, would talk about how creativity and like the natural aptitude to learning that you have as a 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old. As soon as you get to school, that is like actually broken down, and young people don't learn in the same way unless that's fostered outside of the school. And so home learning is a way in which you can do that, but that's a lifestyle choice.
Why do you think Sheffield schools are failing these kids? Why do you think where they fail? Why are the Sheffield schools failing these kids? I know you can't go into too much, but
I don't think it's just a Sheffield problem, but what I've been fortunate enough to do is I've gone and visited other places. So, I've gone and visited different alternative provision schools in different parts of the country. Yeah. The reality is, I think we're at the beginning of a wave of educational establishments offering very different things for young people. Okay. because I think it's about why is Sheffield schools like failing these particular kids. I mean, I could be controversial and go back to some key people who led Ofsted a number of years ago, who made it the way you improve schools is that you get rid of the kids that are causing all the problems. And there was a spike in permanent exclusions. Yeah. Sheffield as a city has too many permanent exclusions. And to me, like, whilst that's justified from, like, you know, it's a really difficult balance, and I've been in it and I see it, really difficult balance. How do you create environments for the majority of kids when there are a few young people that are causing all sorts of problems? Yeah. And one justification for that is that, well, actually you make it a safer, better environment for all these other kids. Mm-hmm. But for me, the problem with that, and this is a values thing, is that what you're saying to the young people who essentially are communicating, I'm in crisis, there's something wrong here, you're saying, well, you no longer fit in this system, so goodbye. And too often I've seen it as a governor. I've been a governor of a few different schools. I've felt it in the schools I've worked at, and we work with young people now where I see it is that the problem is that everybody's saying it's not my responsibility.
So they're passing it on, basically, or they're not willing to take
it
by the horn, so to speak.
A school does things in a particular way. I can't bring myself to blame one organisation or different people. I just think that people don't know what to do with these young people that they see as incredibly challenging. What I'm saying is you need to give them a space where they can be loved. When you look at it through the lens of psychology, like you actually, firstly, brain development wise, as an adolescent, you're now the most important people in your world are your peers, your mates, all right? Yeah. What they think, what they're doing, that's the most important thing. Yeah. Prior to that, it's usually your parents and your family environment. So that's number one. Your sense of identity is affected by what your mates are thinking about you and the situations you're in there. It. And actually, so then you're in a situation where, let's call it status. You've got like a low status in that particular way.
Your confidence is shot.
Absolutely. So then what you want, you look for other ways to get status amongst your peers, right? So
be the clown.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get it in that way. Yeah. So how do you do it? You know, you've got to look at different ways. Yeah. And I think if there are not different ways for you to have a sense of status, and I think back to my time at school, and it was sport. Like I did so much sport at school, and that's how I got my status in school amongst my peers. And I was the class clown. Like you know, I would just make people laugh, and I would or I was setting up a little business and selling sweets in schools, and you know, like that. I just found ways to do it, which didn't mean the academic side of it was an issue for me. If as a young person you feel like I can't succeed in this environment, and look at me, I look stupid in front of everyone. Yeah. Everyone can learn and grow in the right environment, and actually we help kids understand that this environment they've come out of from school is the challenge. It has been the challenging thing for them. It isn't that there's something wrong with them. It's that this environment. I'm into like organisational change and development, and like that's. But change. To me, it's about culture within a school. And I've heard some phenomenal head teachers talk about how they've changed. I mean, I was hearing about a school in Leeds, an academy chain in Leeds that a few Sheffield head teachers listen to as well, where they just shifted an approach, like which is a more coaching approach. So the start of the day on a Monday, the head teacher and all his leadership team, they'd have like a half-hour, 40-minute conversation, a coaching conversation as a team about what's going on for their weekend, how are people coming into work today, really caring about people. Yeah. Then that leadership team would go and do that with the group of staff. And they started school later because of it. So the students had a later start on a Monday because of it. Because then once the staff team have had that coaching conversation as well, how are you all doing? Every member of staff, including office staff, everyone, like had a group of 6 to 8 young people that was their coaching group. So the first thing that a young person gets is not about what we're going to do for the day or get into the day. It's how are you doing? Like, what's going on? And it's across year groups as well. The 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And so actually the older ones become mentors to the younger ones within that small coaching group. Yeah. They do that again on a Wednesday afternoon for an extended period of time, and so they'll have another coaching group within midweek, and then the last thing on a Friday. So they're sandwiched a week with the coaching that goes on in this small group coaching. And actually that shift, it helps every young person be known. It helps every young person like have other people across year groups that they're able to build relationships with. It's actually forming positive relationships and the ability to do good relationships within schools. I just thought it was
a model. It's a good model to
absolutely. I am someone who thinks differently, right? And what I've embraced with that is I don't look at things and I think, well, that's the way it is, so that's the way it is.
Yeah.
I think, well, no, if that's the way it is and there's problems with that, we need to create something different. We need to innovate. We need to do something different.
Yeah,
and I think that's where Shaped came out of. It was there's a problem here. I don't see anyone else really grappling with this problem to an extent where we're really helping these young people. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to do it.
So he talks about the help that the people who sort of got help get you going and doing your part. What about the other? Did you get much resistance? Have you had schools or governors sort of saying this is not how it should be? And
not really. Alternative provision is established in the city. Like, it's not that it isn't, but I think
but again,
the challenge is
performances within that.
Yeah, I mean, what we have to be very careful of is that we are following Department for Education guidance, on alternative provision, and that's the thing that we've got to make sure we're doing things in the right way. And there are difficulties and barriers with that. I would love to be able to educate young people for the whole week, but we're not able to because of our status as an alternative and unregistered with Ofsted alternative provision. They're in one environment and then they go into another environment. And for young people to consistently learn and grow, which is what we're seeing, with the young people we work with over a period of time, is it requires patience. It requires, if something goes wrong, you don't say, well, you're suspended for the day. You say, let's go, let's work out how we deal with this. And a lot of our approach, actually, we've developed a number of tools which essentially help our young people communicate what's going on underneath the surface. So if the communication through their behaviour is really challenging behaviour, actually what you need to get to is find a way in which to communicate to what's going on underneath the surface, outside of that. So what we've done is develop a few tools which make some of that stuff a lot easier for young people to talk about. And that's a big part of our approach, is helping young people become more self-aware, helping them communicate the things that are under the surface, in order to find a way and help them, empower them to, do the great stuff we believe they can do, So,
and you mentioned there that the long-term plan, you'd like to have more time with them. What does that look like?
So, we're on a path now where we are seeking to become a registered alternate provision school. So, keeping our model, keeping the way we do things at the heart of it, but essentially sort of ramping it up, offering a broader curriculum. Basically, maybe going back to that image that I shared at the beginning, is creating some lights around the city and connecting them up to create a net that would catch young people as an official school. That's our journey.
How do you measure the success of the students here? How's it all measured? Is it done by coursework? Is it done by progress? Like charts? Or?
So everyone that we work with sits exams.
Oh, right, okay.
So that isn't how we measure our progress, but that's the path they're on, and that's why schools use us, because we've got a mixture.
So they're doing GCSEs and A-levels and stuff here?
Well, they don't do A-levels, but
I think that's part of the problem with school in general, though, is it's a numbers game, how many people... And
I say that's not how we measure, that's the path that young people are on, so that we're not... They want to do everything that everybody else is doing, and what we're trying to demonstrate is that in a different environment, you can do that. What we actually measure is their growth as a person.
Yeah, of course.
So we have sort of ways in which we are measuring their well-being. We're measuring their. In the past, we've used a Boxall profile, which is something which measures their development stages. So it's used within schools, but it's about how you. Rather than looking at the behaviours, it looks at if you can't play a board game, right, and take turns, and it's an organised, structured thing, how are you going to have the skills in order to sit around a small group table and take instruction from a teacher? So it's a good measure is actually how good you are at doing a structured activity that is led by an adult. If that's the challenge for a young person, then you've got to go back there, because it's about developmental stages. When young people haven't had those developmental stages in their life, that's part of the reason why the environment of school doesn't work for them, because you tell them to sit down and focus and concentrate, but actually they just, for all sorts of different reasons, really struggling to do that. So we measure that's those softer skills, those softer elements, and we help the young person kind of recognise the way that they have developed, but we also do it in our termly report.
Do you feed that back to their schools?
We feed back to schools, feed back to parents. Talk about it with the young person. Look at your development, like help them see where they've come from and what they are doing now.
What's an example? You don't have to name anybody, but a really good outcome where, I mean, presumably the long-term goal is for these people to be out there in employment. Have you had somebody who was sort of completely off the rails and now doing well?
I mean, we've got loads, and I mean, I'm sure we'll put like the website or whatever in the notes, but we've got some case studies on there. But there's a young person we worked with who couldn't go into school for all sorts of different reasons, relationships with other students, like there was a whole load of bullying that was going on. He needed a different environment to work in, and we were able to help him get his GCSEs in English and maths. But more than that, just help him engage in socialising with other young people again and developing in that sense. And he had this dream of he wanted to race. He wanted to do like racing. He raced go-karts, right? Through the work we've done with him, and I think parents would say the same, that we were able to get him back to a level of confidence where he now is holding. I mean, I think he's working like 7 days a week at Strawberry. Racing, like, so they tune engine. I don't really know what they do.
Virgin Mercedes and F1 champ.
No, but he works on engines. Like he wanted to go into racing, but now he's working in the field that he wants to work at, and absolutely loving it, and going to different race events like around the country and working on the engines and that sort of stuff.
Channeling his passion.
Absolutely, and there's numerous examples of that. They're able to. Like whether they go onto the Prince's Trust, that's something we've connected young people to. Whether they go into college, whether they go into some of the alternative post-16 environments, like it's about finding the right environment for that young person and staying in touch with them.
I think sometimes, like you said, it's probably just they probably haven't had somebody with an arm around them and a guiding.
I took a lad from Parson Cross to Wentworth Gardens. I know you went through that. So you know the maze that's there at the garden centre and everything, and it was a one-to-one sort of time with this young lad who's in all sorts of different bother, and we were walking around the gardens, and he really wanted to be a gardener. Like he wanted to be outside, and yes, has ADHD, has experienced all sorts of like domestic violence in the home and all sorts of different situations that are just really challenging for anyone to deal with. This lad is 15 years old at the time. And he sort of looked at the environment and he was just like, if I grew up in somewhere like this, I'd have been completely different. And he just appreciated the beauty of where he was and what was going on. And it was almost like I wish it would have been different, you know? Yeah. And that same lad, I was sat He'd got into a difficult situation at home where he got really aggressive with someone in his family, and the police had been called. And I was sat with him in a garden, a public garden near his house, and the police were coming, and he knew the police were coming, and I was just sat with him because he just was in a massive crisis. And I said, "What do you need? What do you actually need?" And he said, "I just need someone to help me and just get alongside me." And like he was worrying also about when he left Shaped and when he was moving into the next thing. And you know, last year we became a charity, and the objectives of our charity status were all around, we want to help young people into adulthood. At the minute, we do education. But actually there's so much forming that happens within young people from those ages of 16 to 25. And so we set our objectives to work with young people up to the age of 25, because we want to do more around helping to shape young people in that space, because I think there's so much mentoring that's needed. There's so many young people just need someone to get alongside them, to be non-judgmental, to help them think, actually, you know, this is how it feels right now. This isn't how it needs to be. And I think that's a big area that we want to grow in.
Must be for people who haven't gone through the schooling system. Maybe they've built a community here, they've got a relationship with you. Once they're out the other end, as you say, 6 months to a year down the line, they could easily revert back to.
And I've seen that happen as well. I've also bumped into parents in Asda, in Parson Cross. I said, "Oh, how's so-and-so doing?" And they're like, "He hasn't left his bedroom for 2 months." And I'm like, let me come around and see him. Like, it's like, that's a reality, right? That you then come out of something that's been positive, and then nothing changed, you revert back. Becoming a school is a vehicle for me to creating a community that young people actually value, that they think, and I think about them small coaching groups, you know, but actually ways in which young people feel heard, listened to, belonged, and have someone, like, a sense of belonging, but have someone who's looking out for them, you know, because we will, any of our staff, and they're amazing, who just live out the values of what we're trying to do. We'll give a young person a phone call. We have parents ringing up saying, Dave, like, you know, this has happened, you know, yeah, of course, how can we help? Because it's about people, right? Yeah. Like some might say, well, you can't do that in the school environment because it's too big. And the example I gave of that school in Leeds is a way in which that is happening.
Yeah. It's a cultural thing.
Absolutely. So the culture and the values it shaped are kind of the driving force behind the way we do it. And we will continue to try and address those problems. This is me now for the next, I don't know when I'll retire, but 20 years.
So obviously your day-to-day, you're experiencing and witnessing people going through mental health struggles. You seem like an ultra-positive person on the times that I've met you. Do you ever have your own moments at dark hours of mental health, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know where to start with all of that, but absolutely. I negative self-talk, levels of anxiety, all of that is the stuff under the surface. People can judge me for how I come across in here and what I do, and you know, like we played football together, we went to the pub, but that doesn't change anything about what goes on under the surface. And I've had to work really hard at trying to quieten parts of me, like the voices that are negative, an emotional response to something. And you know, it takes work. And
it's interesting, before we started rolling, you were sort of saying that other guests seem to be up here, and actually I think it's a human nature to sort of think like that. But again, on the way here, I was listening to the thing you'd sent through, and I'd read the bio this morning, and actually you're right up there as far as I'm concerned. It's easy to look at someone else's journey and think, they're a bit more, and I think that's human nature, isn't it? I think everybody looks at the next person and think they've got this stuff together so much better than I, but I think it's normal.
One thing I'll say, in my work life, what I've noticed now is that I was the most stressed and the most anxious in certain jobs that I was in when my personal values were not aligned with the organisation's values. And that's something, obviously, having now set up an organisation where the organisation's values are my values, I might be dealing with extremely challenging and stressful situations, but the reality is I'm not stressed about my work.
You're calling the shots.
Yeah, and I'm able to operate in a way which is aligned with me. You know, schools that I've left, a change in leader has come in, and their values cannot align with mine because they're asking me to do stuff that I just fundamentally disagree with. Like that's where I'm in my most stressed place, and I've been off work with stress. I had it all planned out, and this is what I was doing. This was the school I was working in. This is how it was going to work, and all of that just went from under me.
Yeah, I know Sid, you had a tough time with Forge.
Yeah, Forge Valley. I was only there for 18 months. It was a fair while ago. Essentially, everything that I thought was going to happen, and partly I live in the area, like my kids were going to go there, I was working in the school, like it was going to be, that's how it was going to be. But the leadership changed, and I couldn't see eye to eye with how that was going to work, and I ended up leaving in a puff of smoke. I was off work with stress. And it was like my whole world was just taken from under me, and I felt like I was hanging on by my fingertips. And what was really interesting in that moment is that there was a point where I let go. And what I found was about 2 inches underneath my feet, there was a solid rock. And actually that, I talked very briefly about my faith and how that, my faith in God, I would describe myself as a follower of Jesus. I don't actually find institutions in the church very helpful a lot of the time. I don't really, I find that there's been so much, especially at the minute, there's just so much going on with all of that. But in terms of a personal thing, the rock for me was actually, it doesn't matter about my job. It doesn't matter about anything else. There was something solid there that I landed on when I let go of everything. Right. And what was interesting, I wasn't going to work in education again. And then my wife sort of nudged me and showed me, look at this job at Birley. And I just went and visited them. And they did on this tour with would be my future line manager, that I didn't know at the time, but they were just describing stuff they were doing. And they were having a Love Harry week, right? The whole school was aware that this looked after child who's having a really difficult time, it was Love Harry Week. So everyone had to do that. And I was like, this is in line with my values. Yeah. Actually, I could work here. But what I did, probably the most significant thing with me, was I changed my relationship with my work life in that transition. And I decided I'm not going to wrap up my identity in my work. It made sense. To me, that was the way. I was on a mission. I was doing this. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. But I realised that was what I was clinging on to with my fingertips. And then when I let go, I was okay. And I didn't lose everything. I didn't lose everything. There was something solid there. And by changing my relationship with my work, it meant that I wasn't going to work every hour under the sun thinking that was what I needed to achieve. I was going to do what I needed to do. And it wasn't about, I was still passionate about it, doing a great job and leading a team of people and all of that. So it was hard, but I decided that I wouldn't wrap up my whole identity in it anymore. And I think in those 5 years working at Birley, they were really a big part of forming me and my character, because I was gonna be Dave. These are my values. This is what I do, and not like try to be everything to everyone and try to be successful and all of that sort of stuff. So that was pretty key for me. And actually, it made me realise that I'm more than inclusion manager at Forge Valley or Birley or wherever I worked. I'm a dad. I've got to focus on my kids. I'm a husband. I've got to focus on my wife. Yeah. I've got friendships and relationships outside of work that are really important. And actually, it's the whole of me, and work is just a part of me, part of my life. So it's kind of putting it into perspective, because at Forge Valley, it became everything, to the point where I was falling asleep at the dinner table with the kids, because I didn't have anything, I didn't have any energy left, and it was such a big part of my life, and it was about redressing that and making that, putting it in its right size, so that there was.
That seems a common theme as well for people who work in schools. I think I know a friend of mine, he went through stress. He's walked away from it. He does project management now, and ironically, project managing building health seems to be less stressful than being a teacher was for him. So.
Materials are more predictable than kids.
One of the things that we've had, I know you've been watching the podcast, is now you know about the podcast, and obviously you're ahead of us in that sense. You've watched a few of the episodes by the sounds of things, but who do you think we should get in front of? Is there anyone?
So there's a CEO of Gold Digger, a charity in Sheffield, Beth, she'd be really interesting. Another great charity in Sheffield called Grow UK. They help young people into work through gardening activities. Both really brilliant outfits. You want to find out about some of that stuff going on in Sheffield, because that's having a big impact on a lot of young people.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
Brilliant. So you were talking about this. The long-term plan is to make Shaped a school.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a couple of sites throughout the city. Where would that be? Would that be here?
Well, we're currently looking for a building, right? So I don't know when this will go out.
Sheffield Uni selling a lot of buildings.
Right, well, mate, if you can connect me, we are looking for a building, but we've got a brief that we've put out there, and I'm looking for other places to put it out there. Yeah, January, we are on the hunt for some building space. So I'll
get it out on LinkedIn and get people points in your direction.
Yeah, and we've got a brief. People can get in touch through the website, and we're also looking for people who maybe feel passionate about what we're trying to do, to invest some money into it as well. I don't know what that looks like. We're looking for donations as a charity. Yeah. I'd work long term with someone, to think about how we could finance on what we're doing, because there are a lot of startup costs, a lot of things that we need to get in place. But the exciting thing is, one of the places that we visited down in Leamington Spa actually, just is that they've got the same values of us. They're 4 years ahead of us. They've been in school for 4 years. And their expertise is going to be really valuable to us.
Yeah.
And the person hopefully going to be coaching and mentoring me that's done all of that as well. So yeah, I'm excited for what's to come. I've got the mandate from our trustees. This is what we're going to do in the city. There's a need, and we understand the need. And what we've been doing over the last 5 years is a foundation for the type of school that we want to become. So we're ready to go.
Well, Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've always enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it.
As soon as we started doing the podcast, I thought it'd be good to get you on. And
thank you for having me.
Brilliant story.
Yeah.
On our next episode, we'll be interviewing Chad Weston, who was born in Middlesbrough and raised across Libya and the UAE. He eventually landed in Sheffield in 1998 and has called it home ever since. Chad joined with the Children's Hospital charity, where he is now Chief Fun Officer, driving key initiatives like the Bright Young Dreams mental health campaign and strengthening corporate partnerships. Chad also runs his own consultancy, Litchfield Consulting, which has developed organically over the last 20 years, and he has worked extensively to cultivate teams in the UK, US and Italy. Join us on episode 8 as we talk to Chad at the Children's Hospital.